Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Campers and residents of Jasper continue to evacuate as wildfires threaten the national park and town. There's more talk of the Trudeau government potentially decriminalizing hardcore drugs, including fentanyl and cocaine. Political reporter Brian Lilly will explain. And the trial of the Coutts2, charged with conspiring to commit murder of police officers, continues in Lethbridge. We have an update for you.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Fire officials say all hands are on deck after wildfire evacuees from Jasper National Park took refuge in British Columbia overnight. Campers and Jasper residents were given just 5 hours notice to pack up and get out on Monday night as several fires spread rapidly. They can only drive west, forcing thousands of people into small town of Valemount, BC. Town officials say every parking lot, boulevard, and side road is full of vehicles. Some evacuees spent the night on the floor of the local arena, while others bunked down at the Legion. A bulletin from BC Wildfire Service warns that a change in weather could cause even more wildfire activity in that province, making it much more difficult for crews to respond to blazes. The forecast is calling for more thunderstorms in the north and parts of the south after weeks of hot and dry weather. 4 of the more than 360 fires burning across British Columbia are classified as wildfires of note. That includes the 200 square kilometer Shetland Creek fire between Ashcroft and Spence's Bridge in the southern interior. Residents in Williams Lake, British Columbia got a front row look at the wildfire fight to try and save their community. Spencer Stratton said he watched as crews battled the blaze about a block away as the fire crept into his city.
The fire was pretty big. So what we did is we walked down the road there. Police, fire rescue, and first responders were all blocking off the roads, not letting anybody through. We were already down at that point when they were blocking the areas through. We watched school district employees start moving the school buses and everything like that out of the way so that they could not get burnt in case the fire decided to hop up the road there. But we ended up seeing the trucking company. There is a bunch of garage and bay doors down there, and all of those had caught on fire. I think the left-hand side of it is the only thing that's still standing. There was water bombers that, like the big planes, as you saw in the one photo, he had flew right overhead, and he was not more than 4 buildings above us in the air. So he was really low to the ground. So it shook the whole parking lot, cars, buildings, everything when he got in that close.
Well, some of the wildfire smoke has made its way here to our region in southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, the air quality along with the blistering hot temperatures makes it an easy decision for some to just stay indoors here in Lethbridge?
Yeah, true, but hopefully they have air conditioning because sometimes it feels hotter inside the house than it does outside, especially at night. So I feel for you if you don't have it because we are expected to see these temperatures at least for the next couple of days. We are keeping our eyes on Wednesday, though. We're seeing that expected high of 35 degrees. Now, if we reach that 35 degrees, that means that we will break a record. The record on that day was 34.3 degrees. That happened back in 2007. So if we reach that expected high, then we have broken that record. We set a new record for that day. We also saw that 35 today, although it felt much hotter. This evening, we're seeing that overnight low of 12 degrees, which should be lovely, although it oftentimes feels warmer at night because of the heat of the day. So we could see that chance of showers tomorrow as well. I'll be back later in the show to give you that full 7-day update. And the good news is that we are going to be seeing temperatures go back into the 20s very soon.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. Back at the Lethbridge Courthouse, the trial for Chris Carbert and Anthony Olenek continued as Carbert once again took the stand in front of the jury. BCN's Landon Hickok is back at the courthouse and has more on what transpired.
Things are heating up outside here, just like they are in the trial of Anthony Olenek and Chris Carbert. Now today, Chris Carbert continued his defense testimony presented by defense lawyer Marilyn Burns and has begun his cross-examination presented by Crown Prosecutor Stephen Johnston. Now when Stephen Johnston began his cross-examination on Chris Carbert, he confronted him regarding his claims that he would flee to the mountains in a, quote, worst-case scenario. This was when Chris Carbert would confirm that he would resist against authorities if they were to theoretically force vaccinations upon him and his son. Johnson also confronted Carbert on the now identified AR-15 that Carbert had in his possession during the time of his arrest, that he claimed that he bought from a friend, Steve Ferguson, that Steve claimed that was a custom made instead. Now, Marilyn Burns did confirm with Chris Carbert that he did send texts shortly before his arrest that he advocated for a peaceful resolution between the protesters and the police officers that were there. After taking Monday off this week, we still have to complete Chris Carbert's cross-examination before we move on to Anthony Olenik's defense and cross-examination. Only then can we see the closing arguments and verdict come, which we may expect to even see pushed back until next week. So for all updates, tune into Bridge City News for all that's yet to come. Hal?
That was Landon Hickok joining us from the Lethbridge Courthouse. Lethbridge police are looking for an escaped convict. They received notification from the Lethbridge Correctional Centre that their prisoner fled while working in the Legacy area. Sean Horvath was last seen around 10 a.m. on Tuesday wearing orange pants, a t-shirt, and brown work boots. If you've seen Horvath, call Lethbridge Police right away at 403-328-4444. Lethbridge Police also say they need help finding a 21-year-old man who's wanted on outstanding warrants. Royer Sopal Caldera is wanted on many counts, including identity fraud and attempted fraud over $5,000. If you've seen him, you're asked to call Crime Stoppers right away at 1-800-222-8477. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre blasted Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on social media in regards to the Liberals' alleged plans to decriminalize drugs such as cocaine and fentanyl. As you may recall, British Columbia already walked away from their experiment of decriminalizing hardcore drugs. We asked Sun political columnist Brian Lilly why the push from the feds for a potential national plan.
They don't want to back away from this. They actually want to lean in on this. They want to make this the policy going forward, that you're going to support decriminalization. And lots of Liberals are saying, well, it's not the same as legalization. In effect, it is. What is decriminalization? It's no longer illegal, Hal, for you to have a bag of cocaine on you or for you to use it. So it is effective legalization. And the Liberals are playing word games on this.
Mr. Lilly will also have details of how the next president of the United States, whether it's Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, will not be good for Canada. He'll explain coming up after Business News. U.S. President Joe Biden says he's accepted the resignation of Secret Service Director Kim Cheadle and is wishing her all the best. After being raked over the coals in front of a congressional committee recently, she announced her resignation over the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. Biden says the independent review into what happened on July the 13th continues and that he's looking forward to assessing its conclusions. House Speaker Mike Johnson says Cheadle's resignation was long overdue and should have happened last week already.
I'm glad she did the right thing. Look, our reaction, the immediate reaction to her resignation is that it is overdue. She should have done this at least a week ago. I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see that she has heeded the call of both Republicans and Democrats. Now we have to pick up the pieces. We have to rebuild the American people's faith and trust in the Secret Service as an agency. It has an incredibly important responsibility in protecting presidents, former presidents, and other officials in the executive branch, and we've got a lot of work to do. The task force that we'll be putting together is going to be very important. As I said, they have three responsibilities: to investigate what happened, the debacle that happened 2 Saturdays ago, to hold those accountable. It certainly was the director, Cheadle, but there may be others in the line of authority who are also culpable in what happened and the errors and mistakes there. And finally, to ensure that those mistakes do not happen again.
The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is applauding the Alberta government for its latest credit rating outlook improvement. Now, on Monday, Moody's Ratings changed our province's credit rating outlook to positive. That's up from stable and affirmed our province's AA2 credit rating. To chat about this in more detail is the Alberta Director of the CTF, Chris Sims, who joins us from here in Lethbridge. Chris, bottom line, what does this really mean for Alberta taxpayers?
This means that in the eyes of Moody's and other ratings agencies like Fitch, which also gave them an upgrade a few weeks ago, that we are doing well as a province, that fiscal discipline matters, balancing the budget matters, paying down the debt matters, and ultimately, it's going to be less expensive for us to borrow money, meaning taxpayers are going to save money because of this.
Now, Chris, many Canadians are really concerned about the huge debt the Trudeau government keeps racking up. which is now over $1 trillion. You actually have a debt clock, which makes the rounds across the country and is here in Lethbridge on Wednesday.
So picture a big moving truck. We have a big digital screen on either side of this thing, and it's showing the debt, the national debt, in real time. So we're at about $1.2 trillion right now, thanks to the Trudeau government doubling the federal debt. And we're bringing it to Lethbridge. We're going to be at Legends Pub on Wednesday night, starting at 6 o'clock. We're going to be having some nachos, taking some pictures. So if you want a selfie with the debt clock, come on by Legends.
Thanks so much for your time today, Chris. That was Chris Sims, Alberta Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joining us from here in Lethbridge. The Alberta government announced new funding to address rising enrollment here in our schools. Officials say $215 million will go towards rising operational costs and inflation associated with a higher enrollment for the school next school year. The province says some of the funds will go towards building up to 100 new modular classrooms, creating up to 2,500 new spaces in some of Alberta's fastest growing communities. Other monies will go towards hiring more teachers and educational assistants. The moves were applauded by both school boards in Calgary and Edmonton. Premier Daniel Smith spoke about the excitement surrounding the groundbreaking for Calgary's new $1.2 billion arena. She says not only will the new facility be great for the Calgary Flames and their fans, but it'll also draw more big names when it comes to concerts.
And once the revitalization is complete, Calgary will be giving every major city in North America a run for its money as a destination for events, whether you're here to see a concert or watch the Flames in the playoffs. Let's be aspirational about this. As a place for a community where friends and neighbors can meet to catch a show, have a dinner, or stroll the Rivers District, and is the best place to call home.
Lethbridge City Council voted to provide $1.25 million in a bid to host the 2026 Memorial Cup. Now, during the meeting, it was also agreed to provide a letter of support to the Sport Tourism Advisory Committee. The sporting event will run for 10 days beginning at the end of May.
I've reviewed everything, including the council minutes. Everything looked fine to me. Any questions of my colleagues? If there's none, I will call for the vote.
Question has been called. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you.
I'm in favor as well. Hopefully we can land the Memorial Cup. By the way, the Memorial Cup is the Canadian Hockey League's top prize, with a 4-team tournament featuring league champions from the WHL, QMJHL, OHL, along with the host team, which will be the Lethbridge Hurricanes. Spitz Stadium will be a busy place this week as Lethbridge is playing host to the 2024 Junior Little League Championships. 7 teams from across Canada are vying for the opportunity to advance to the Little League World Series in August. Lethbridge has hosted the championship since 2010, and tournament director Kevin Kavami says organizers take a lot of pride in hosting a top-notch event on and off the field.
I think it's just great to welcome all the teams from across the country and showcase our city and our stadiums to them, and we look forward to a great week, as I said, and send a deserving champion on to Taylor, Michigan and the Junior League World Series.
It's amazing. It's really exciting. The guys have been looking forward to this all year, you know, and it kind of brings me back to when I did the same thing 10 years ago when I was 14. It's really exciting. It's great competition, great baseball, and you can just see it in the kids' faces. They're happy to be here, so am I. It's a great experience.
Really happy to be here. I think everybody's really happy to be here. I think we're just going to have fun. We're going to play our best, and win or lose, we'll have some fun.
The tournament for players 12 to 14 years of age got underway Tuesday at Spitz Stadium and runs until next Wednesday, when a champion will be crowned. To build community and to share knowledge, that's what the Interfaith Food Bank's Help Hobbies program is really all about. The strategy brings together community members to share their talents Tuesdays from 10 till noon. Kitchen facilitator Jessica Gelada says members socialize while sharing their hobbies to help benefit the community. She also says the money collected through the sale of homemade products is used for fundraising efforts. Gelada explains which projects are being developed.
Sewing, knitting, or crocheting. There are projects for aprons, blankets, washcloths, little teddy bears and stuffies, pin cushions. The ladies definitely go ahead and find a niche that may be needed There's also a lot of support for our baby bundle programs, all proceeds going back into interfaith, and a lot of those are aprons, quilts, blankets. There's 3 opportunities that we have identified throughout the year for our projects to be sold at. We host a Christmas market here at Interfaith each year. We have our Garden Days event, which we have our market, and as well as our Canada Day at Galt Gardens. There is a big market there that the ladies participate in. The last 3 markets that we've had, we have been able to raise over $1,000 worth of funds from the projects that have been created.
Gelada says the Help Hobbies program began back in 2019, but came to a screeching halt during the pandemic, but started up again last year. Organizers say their products are available to purchase at the Interfaith Food Bank. You know, as we age, our ability to hear may diminish somewhat, but what about our younger generation? How do we recognize hearing issues in our kids? Mitchell Harris, audiologist with Hearing Life here in Lethbridge, offers some tips on what to look out for.
So often things you're looking for is, changes in behavior. So they might get more withdrawn or frustrated and feel like they're not, participating in the same way. Looking for those speech and language milestones, and if they're delayed that way, then that's a good indicator that hearing might play a role there. You might have them mispronouncing words or mishearing words, especially when they're really little. Then you're looking for things like having them, not react to loud sounds. So if big brother's beside them and is banging on pots and they're not responding at all, then it's probably not that they're just used to that. It's probably that they're not hearing that sound come through.
Make sure you catch the entire interview with audiologist Mitchell Harris and BCN's Michael Clausen coming up after Business News. Well, we were well above 30 degrees once again today here in southwestern Alberta, and a little smoky as well with the wildfire smoke. The hot temperatures should be sticking around for most of the week. A full look at the weather pictures coming up. That wildfire smoke is impacting so many regions across the province right now. We have wildfires burning in both Alberta and British Columbia. Jeanette Rocher is in now with a full look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, days like today make it tough for those who don't have air conditioning. You don't want to open the windows to let all the smoke in, but you still need a little bit of a breeze.
Well, that's so true, Hal, especially because it's those fine particles in the wildfire smoke that pose the biggest health risks to pretty much almost everybody. Now, we did call for a widespread smoke today. However, when I went outside, there was a lot of sunshine out there, a bit hazy, but mostly sunny. So we didn't get quite as hard hit with the wildfire as they did more up north. Also, we exceeded that 35 today. It was more like 36. Now, the 35 that we're looking at tomorrow, if we reach that, then that means we have hit a new record for that day. So the record was set back in 2007, and it was 34.3 on that day, which is July 24th. So if we reach that 35, we hit a new record. Also looking for a chance of showers later in the day and a risk of a thunderstorm. The rest of the week, sunny and hot. 29 for a high on Thursday, getting down to the 20s though. Friday and Saturday highs of 27 on both of those days, up to 30 on Sunday and back to 32 on Monday. So going to be a hot one ahead of us. The average high for this time of year, 26, average low 11. 38 was the high temperature on this day, happening back in 2003, and the coldest day on record was 1982, was only 2 degrees. 5:51 is when the sun rose this morning. Sunset this evening at 9:24 p.m., giving us 15 hours and 33 minutes of daylight, 2 minutes less daylight than we saw yesterday. Victoria starting out sunny, could see a bit of sun and cloud coverage throughout the rest of the day. High of 22, more like 17 where the wind blows on shore, and 50k winds in the Juan de Fuca Strait. Vancouver also mainly sunny skies, 22 for a high. Edmonton sat in a air quality advisory today due to that wildfire smoke. Of course, Jasper has been evacuated now, as you mentioned earlier there. Also, a heat warning was in effect for today, but tomorrow, starting Wednesday, we are seeing those temperatures drop considerably, only a high of 21 degrees tomorrow, and then that 60% chance of showers tomorrow in Edmonton should clear away, hopefully, a lot of that smoke, looking at a risk of a thunderstorm later in the day as well. Clear skies in Calgary tomorrow, though, high of 33 tomorrow, as well, as they are still under that prolonged heat event, lasting a few more days there into the week. Also in Saskatchewan, seeing local smoke in both Saskatoon and Regina, both of those cities also Also, the humidex sitting at 43, which is extremely high, meaning it's a lot of discomfort, and avoid strenuous activity, especially outside. 33 for the high, Saskatoon, 34 in Regina, 26 for the high in Winnipeg, which is much more moderate. Also clear skies there in Winnipeg. Now, as we get into the central part of the country, Toronto and Ottawa both seeing 30 to 70% chance of showers throughout different parts of the day in both of those cities, and could see a risk of a thunderstorm as well. 23 for the high in Toronto, 26 in Ottawa, 27 in Montreal. Montreal seeing 60% chance of showers, could see a risk of a thunderstorm as well later in the day. Now, Fredericton seeing a 60% chance of showers late in the afternoon, 26 for a high, 60% chance of early morning showers in Halifax, but things should clear up by noon there. High of 24 degrees, 25 for the high in Charlottetown, and 23 the high in St. John's with clear skies, more like 27 inland though. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Canadian National Railway has been fined $8 million related to two crude oil spills back in 2015. The Montreal-based railway was ordered to pay the fines by the Ontario Court of Justice after CN Rail pleaded guilty to two charges under the Federal Fisheries Act. The charges are linked to two separate CN train derailments that took place in Northern Ontario in February and March of 2015. More than 3.6 million litres of crude oil were released into the environment by the spills. A huge investigation has been launched into Delta Airlines following last week's faulty software update that caused IT havoc around the world and disrupted air travel. U.S. transportation officials announced the investigation earlier today. They say the investigation is to ensure the airline is following the law and taking care of its passengers during continued widespread disruptions. Delta is still struggling to restore operations more than 4 days after a faulty software update from cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike to more than 8 million Microsoft computers around the world. The Saskatchewan government has put a moratorium on new wild boar farms after decades of expanding feral swine populations. The province also says existing farms will require licensing and regular inspection. Research from the University of Saskatchewan says wild pigs, which is a mixture of wild boar and domestic swine, became a problem back in the 1990s. That's when many escaped livestock farms and adapted to the prairies, growing their territory at a rate of 9% per year in Canada, and threatening native species such as nesting birds, deer, agricultural crops, and farm livestock. A massive new solar farm is coming to the city of Medicine Hat. The Alberta Utilities Commission has approved this 1,600-acre Sama solar farm to be built in the northern part of the city by Irish developer DP Energy. The farm will consist of over 600,000 panels. It'll make the farm the largest urban solar farm in Canada at a capacity of 325 megawatts. The project is expected to cost over $400 million, with construction expected to employ hundreds and complete by the year 2027. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 58 points on the day to finish at 22,813. The Dow was down 57 points to 40,358. The S&P 500 was down 8 on the day to 5555, and the Nasdaq was down 10 points to 17,997. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 93 cents to 77.47 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was up 11 cents to 2.24 U.S. Gold was up 7.76 on the day to 24.0435 U.S. an ounce, and silver was unchanged at 29.12 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.89 per bushel, barley's at $5.94, canola's at $15.28, and corn is at $7.29 per bushel. Live cattle August contract was up $2.38 to $186.30. Feeder cattle August contract was up $2.35 to $258.75, and lean hogs August contract was up $1.28 to $93.65. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 72.60 U.S. Recapping one of our top stories, Alberta emergency officials say the evacuation of Jasper National Park is going quite well after nearby wildfires forced thousands of people to flee west on Monday night. The province issued an emergency alert advising that everyone in Jasper was to leave immediately. The Jasper blazes are one of the many fires throughout the province that have already forced another 7,500 people out of remote communities. Federal Tory leader Pierre Poilievre is blasting the Trudeau government on its alleged push to decriminalize hardcore drugs. Sun political columnist Brian Lilley will have more details for us momentarily. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has taken to social media blasting the Trudeau government on the alleged push to legalize hardcore drugs such as fentanyl and cocaine. Now, to chat about this in more detail is Sun political columnist Brian Lilley, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, BC already walked away from their experiment of legalizing hardcore drugs. Why the push for a potential plan to go national?
Because the Trudeau Liberals just fundamentally believe in this. And when this story came out, with media outlet got a hold of the briefing book of Yara Sachs, the junior health minister in charge of mental health and addictions. And in a briefing book preparing her to answer questions before a House committee on March 21st, they had in there a line about national decriminalization, and that the federal government wanted to work with all municipalities and provinces and any jurisdiction that wanted to move forward on decriminalization. And of course, that was before British Columbia said, hey, you know what? This decrim thing, it's not really working out for us. Overdoses are still going up. Crime's awful. We can't even shoo the guy away who's smoking crack at a children's playground. So, you know, that was before that. I would have thought that the Liberals would have backed off a bit. After Pierre Poilievre saw this story, started posting about it on social media, Yara Sachs, the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, said, why are you claiming these are secret documents? They're not. They're posted online. And yes, we want to work with any jurisdiction. So they don't want to back away from this. They actually want to lean in on this. They want to make this the policy going forward, that you're going to support decriminalization. And lots of Liberals are saying, wow, it's not the same as legalization. In effect, it is. What is decriminalization? It's no longer illegal, Hal, for you to have a bag of cocaine on you or for you to use it. So it is effective legalization. And the Liberals are playing word games on this.
Brian, you touched a bit on crime. Premiers across Canada once again asking the feds to consider bail reform changes. Didn't Ottawa just do that? What's driving this latest call?
So there's a couple of things. There was a horrific murder case in British Columbia where a woman was killed by someone who was out on probation and then breached their probation conditions and was released on bail for other crimes, was determined to be a 76% chance of committing another crime by the Parole Board of Canada. Everyone still let him out. The Parole Board, the judges or justices of the peace who granted bail, and then he murdered a woman. That's the allegation. Obviously, things need to be proven in court. And so this has prompted the premiers once again to write a letter saying, look, you obviously didn't fix things enough. The government brought in a very minor reform. Frank Caputo, who is the Conservative MP for Kamloops, one of their justice critics, he told me on a scale of 1 to 10, this is about a 1.5. What they brought in, that there needs to be a lot more done to fix bail. I'll give you another example. So they brought in bail reform for folks who are committing the most heinous crimes and with a gun. But you know, we just had a big auto theft bust announced here in the Toronto area. And this is, I believe there were 18 different people arrested. One of them was out on bail at the time of arrest. I think 5 or 6 others were breach of probation as part of their charges. So they're all charged with serious offenses, and more than a third of them are breaching some kind of release condition. And guess what? They're probably going to be released again. That is the way things are working, because the Liberals put in a de facto bail as quickly as possible with the least onerous conditions.
At the beginning of the year, the Trudeau government, Brian, promised a cap on temporary foreign students. This has not yet happened, and as you and your colleagues have pointed out, the numbers continue to soar.
Yeah, so if I tell you in January, Hal, we're going to put a cap on foreign students coming in as temporary immigrants to Canada. Would you think that by the end of May, we would have accepted more or less people than we accepted it from January to May the previous year? You'd probably say less. We sent out 216,000 study permits between January 1st and May 31st this year. That's 16,000 more than the previous year. That's an 8% increase. That's not insignificant, Hal. It's not like, oh, well, it went up by 1,000, but don't worry, we're going to cut it later on. You add on top of that, we've got 30,000 plus asylum seekers between January and the end of May this year. That's up from 28,000 the year before. We've got more permanent residents, which is the type of immigrants that we're supposed to be going out and seeking, not temporary foreign workers or temporary foreign students. And the asylum claims have gone through the roof compared to a decade ago. So we're bringing in an average of 109,000 people each and every month. Since December 19th, we added 760,000 people, 109,000 people a month. That outstrips job supply. That outstrips the housing supply. That outstrips the ability of provincial governments, regardless of where you are, to provide proper healthcare services, doctors, nurses, etc. So all of these things are adding up. And there have been several reports now. Royal Bank, the Fraser Institute have looked at our GDP per capita. And if it were not for massive immigration numbers, we would be in a recession. Because while our GDP is going up, our GDP per capita is going down.
Brian, south of the border, the Americans had their second major election event. This comes just 8 short days after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Joe Biden stepped down as the nominee for the Democrats. Kamala Harris right now is in the lead as the next nominee here. But Brian, apparently it doesn't matter who the candidate is. Protectionist policies will be put in place, which will really hurt Canada.
And this is the new reality that we have to align with. A lot of what we're hearing out of Ottawa from the political class and the commentators is, oh, we have to prepare for a second Trump presidency. And they make it sound like it's the looming apocalypse. I think the bigger concern is, regardless of which party wins, we are getting protectionism. And so you can drop Biden for Kamala Harris, and look, the party has made it clear that they're rigging the system. The party of democracy has made it clear that they are rigging the system to ensure that Harris is the nominee. And so Biden was more protectionist than Trump. Trump was more protectionist than Obama. Harris is no different than Biden. So what our elected officials in Ottawa, our diplomats in Washington, our bureaucrats in both places have to come to grips with is we are no longer in an era of free trade. Now, this is very important for our producers of all kinds, whether we're talking about aluminum, steel, autos, luxury goods like boats made in places like Kelowna, British Columbia. We're talking about steel up in Edmonton. We're talking about beef in Alberta or pork in Quebec. All of these have been targeted. The softwood lumber in British Columbia, in particular, has been targeted. All of these things are at risk, and these are part of our economic livelihood. Biden has been playing footsies, as we've discussed before, with what is in effect a country of origin labeling requirement for beef and pork by another name. Well, what would that mean? The integrated beef industry of North America would be injured, and it would especially hurt Alberta beef producers. It would hurt pork producers in Quebec and Ontario. Our officials are not aligned for that. They're running around like chickens with their heads cut off, talking about what do we do if Trump wins? Doesn't matter. Our main concern has to be market access and economics. And at this point, both of them are protectionist parties. The Democrats have long been, and the Republicans have now joined them. And we saw that with some of the comments made by J.D. Vance, Trump's vice presidential pick, during the Republican National Convention. Nobody likes NAFTA anymore. Nobody wants to trade anymore. They want to shut the borders.
But Brian, both Kamala Harris, who I believe went to high school here in Canada, and J.D. Vance, Trump's running mate, they both have those Canadian connections. Won't that help us?
Hopefully, but hope's not a plan. And J.D. Vance is from Ohio. That's a border state effectively. It's across Lake Erie from Canada. It's also a major trading partner with Canada, Ontario in particular. And Vance's one of his best friends is Jamil Javani, a former colleague of mine here at the Toronto Sun, and who's currently an MP in Pierre Poilievre's government. So there's that connection. And you're right, Kamala Harris went to high school in Montreal. She graduated from Westmount High School, an English-speaking high school in La Belle Provence. That only gets you so far. They have both made it clear neither one of them likes NAFTA. They're both have protectionist leanings, and so we need to find a way to constantly be on guard, not just for Donald Trump, which is what the bureaucrats and the Trudeau government seem to be worried about, but for all of them. So we need to be constantly on a Team Canada focus. The federal government working with the provinces. I know Alberta has a great trade office down in Washington, housed inside the embassy. Ontario's got to beef up its trade office. We've got to be constantly, all levels of government, regardless of stripe, going down to Washington and making the case in person with people in Congress, be it House of Representatives or the Senate. Here's why trade is important. Here's how much business you do with this province, with that province, with the whole of Canada. Here's how many jobs in your state would be impacted if you shuttered the border. Those are the things we need to be doing, not just running around screaming, oh my goodness, Donald Trump could win again.
Our country's Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie Joly, made a surprise visit to China. So, Brian, what was the purpose of her visit?
Apparently, she was over in Korea, and the Chinese heard about it and invited her over. Depending on who you read, it was either a great visit or a comeuppance, with the Chinese calling Canada on the carpet. And some odd comments that Melanie Joly made in an interview with the Globe and Mail, where she said, oh, look, it's not the government of Canada that has issues with China. It's the perceptions of people. Oh, really? So the government of Canada doesn't have an issue with China interfering in our democracy. The government of Canada doesn't have an issue with China kidnapping two of our citizens, engaging in trade wars. You want to talk about protectionism? It wasn't that long ago that they were blocking shipments of canola, saying that it was inferior to their rapeseed, which they were using for cooking oil. They were claiming there were all kinds of varmints or mold in it and various things. None of it true, but this is what China does. And the Trudeau government, even after everything we've been through, continues to want to suck up to the dictatorship in Beijing. It's really unbecoming of Melanie Joly and the Prime Minister, and of a country that wants to be taken seriously on the international stage.
A Canadian who attempted a stabbing attack in Israel was killed by police, Brian. Now, what do we know about this individual, and what was their motivation behind this attack?
We know very little. We know that it was a Canadian traveling on a Canadian passport. Full name is, I believe, Adam Zachariah Karashi. It's, I've seen various forms, whether Zach or Adam come first. We don't know too much about the person. We know that they flew into Israel. They rented a car. They paid for it in advance, I'm told, and rented it for 2 weeks, paid for it in advance, went to a small community near the Gaza border, got out with a knife and started screaming that there's a genocide and free Palestine. And as he was rushing towards people with a knife, was shot and killed by Israeli forces. So, to me, we're exporting terrorism now. I'm sure there are going to be some people that feel sorry or say Canada should speak up against Israel killing one of our citizens. I don't know what we would say. One of our citizens went to Israel, jumped out at civilians with a knife trying to kill them at a security checkpoint. If you do that in just about any country in the world, you are going to be killed. And that's what happened here. So, we'll be looking for more information. There are a few people with that name that I found trying to determine exactly who this is. Not as easy as you may think.
Brian, before we let you go, let's chit-chat a bit more about the polls. Last time we chatted, the Tories were up by close to 20 points over the Liberals, and there was more talk about Trudeau potentially stepping aside and his successor maybe helping the Liberal Party to rebuild heading into next year's election. What's the latest? What are you hearing?
The latest is Justin Trudeau's on vacation, and he's going to be on vacation for a couple of weeks. He's out in Tofino, walking in the sand. Is that the same as walking in the snow? I don't know. Maybe it is for him. He's a big surfer, loves that coast of British Columbia. Perhaps he takes time with his kids over the next couple of weeks and says, you know what, I'd rather be doing this than being prime minister. I still don't think that's going to happen. The Conservatives are well ahead. The Trudeau Liberals are, to a degree, hoping that Donald Trump wins the presidency in November, and then they can campaign on fear, which they've been trying to do for the last year, by the way, trying to link Pierre Poilievre and Donald Trump and trying to make that out to be the big scary man and, you know, you should be afraid. I think most Canadians see through that. Also, the last poll that I saw that asked Canadians about Donald Trump, I believe it was 33% said they would vote for Donald Trump. And at that point, it was mid-20s for Justin Trudeau. So Donald Trump now more popular than Justin Trudeau in Canada. It's just like it's a bizarre time in American politics. It remains a bizarre time here. Trudeau hasn't faced the same pressure as Biden to step down. The donations have never been great for the Liberals. They're not great right now, but they haven't changed dramatically. He hasn't had caucus members showing up and saying, you've got to step down. He hasn't had party brass saying, you got to leave, boss. Until that starts happening, he's going to hang in there just like Joe Biden wanted until the party threw him out.
Sun political columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining us today from Toronto.
Thank you, Hal.
Well, for some of us, as we age, our ability to hear may diminish. Naturally, this can cause new challenges for us. Of course, sometimes hearing loss can even happen in children. What are the symptoms and what are the solutions? Well, today's guest has some answers for us. Mitchell Harris is an audiologist with Hearing Life here in Lethbridge. Good to have you with us, Mitchell.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have a little chat about hearing. Now, how can a person tell if they have some form of hearing loss? Maybe what are the typical symptoms?
It's often pretty gradual. Sometimes you might have something where you wake up and you're not hearing what you feel like you should, but more often it's just it might be people around you that are feeling like, they're having to repeat more often, or they're just not very clear, or people are mumbling a little bit more. Sometimes you're mistaking words, so you're having a conversation that's different than the person you're talking to. You might be starting to struggle to hear more in groups or social situations, or find yourself often doing the smile and nod without being quite sure what's going on around. So it can be present in a lot of different ways, but mostly just when you're feeling like that communication isn't flowing so easily, whether you're noticing it for yourself or someone else is letting you know, then it's probably some hearing is changing a little bit there.
Gotcha. Now, before we really delve into the subject, let's dive into the inner ear. Can hearing loss even affect a person's balance as well?
It can. So inside the inner ear, then you've got, neighboring systems there. There's the hearing center and the balance that are all kind of within that shared space. And so, how exactly it relates, it can kind of vary. There's a higher level of, fall risk with a higher level of hearing loss.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, so some of it is like there's some correlation there, whether it's a direct correlation or whether there's other factors involved. Often with higher hearing loss, there's often higher age as well, so there's other factors that play a role too. But there's certainly that strong connection between the hearing and the balance.
Right. Now, we do know also that the ear, nose, and throat are all connected. Can one of those other two systems affect our hearing?
They can, for sure. Yeah, especially you'll notice if you have a sinus infection or something like that, then your ears are going to feel plugged up and it sounds like things are a little bit more mumbled. So yeah, everything's a lot more interconnected than we realize sometimes.
Right. Now, speaking of that interconnectedness, and living here in southern Alberta with sometimes the dramatic pressure changes in the wind, have you found from your clients that maybe that's an issue as well for them?
It can be a little bit, especially with hearing aids and wind, they haven't got along so well dealing with those kind of things. And so you've got clients with, more sensitive ears where you're keeping them covered or putting cotton in your ears whenever it's windy to try and just help prevent some of those changes in that pressure. But overall, things are improving for the better. Even with hearing aids, they do a lot better job in wind than they did in the past. And then there's other strategies we can use to try and prevent some of that pain or discomfort that can happen from those changes from pressure or wind.
Right. Now, this might sound a bit odd, but I wanted to ask you about earwax. We clean our face and our hands. Is there anything to cleaning our ears or having them cleaned?
There is. The first disclaimer there is you hear about in schools, don't put anything smaller than your elbow in your ear. And that's still a good rule to live by there. Often the wax that we'll see will be because someone's been using Q-tips or something, it ends up moving it back into the ear as opposed to kind of letting it come out by itself. We do see, with headphones and things like that, then there is more wax that gets built up. And so, if you're feeling like things aren't sounding very good, definitely have them looked at and see if there's some wax building up there. There are some kits you can get at home that are more of a drop or something to help break down the wax. And then in the shower, you can use a little bit of a water rinse to help move that out too. So there's things you can do, but ideally the ear will kind of take care of itself.
Oh, that's really interesting because, of course, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. So how do the ears maintain themselves?
Where the wax is produced is kind of the outer third portion of that ear canal. And that portion of the ear canal, the skin grows outwards. So as the wax is produced, then it's kind of on that moving escalator that's just taking it and all the debris out of the ear. So ideally, after you shower, you could just use a tissue and wipe the outside of your ear, and that would just take that as it moves it on out. But
well, okay. Well, I appreciate that. As mundane as it might sound, it's very interesting to hear that it sounds like our ears are almost made to be a self-contained, self-maintenance system. Would you agree with that?
For sure, yeah.
Right. Now, you mentioned earbuds, and of course I'm wearing my IFB. There's earmuffs, noise-canceling headphones, and of course the ubiquitous white earbuds that people have. Can you talk a little bit about maybe health and safety related to those units?
Yeah. So it's definitely an interesting world we live in when it comes to putting something in your ears. It's getting more and more common to see those in as opposed to see them out. And so you're just wanting to make sure you're trying to keep that at a safe level. With anything in the hearing world for volume, then either really loud noises can start to cause damage, or something that's less loud for a long period of time can do that same, damage, cause that same risk. So with those, headphones, things in your ear, you're wanting to make sure it's at a safe, comfortable volume. You're not cranking it up all the time, and then just make sure that you're not, having them in 24/7 if you can avoid it.
Right. And I'm sure that if people will realize their ears are starting to hurt a little bit, probably a personal indicator to turn that audio down, or just take them out and give your ears a break for a bit.
For sure, yeah. And with a lot of new technology, they have some warnings built in that'll tell you, you're exceeding this volume and you have to kind of confirm it before you can go up. So if you do see those warnings, turn it down a little bit.
Pay attention, right? Now, I want to ask you about children and their ear health. Now, the little ones may not realize that they have a hearing problem. So what should parents be on the lookout for?
In Alberta, we've got an infant hearing screening program, which is really good. So then make sure when you do have an infant to go to those appointments and get those checked. That helps catch a lot of those newborn hearing problems there. But then also as they get older, then those hearing aid problems can arise that might not have been there before. So often things you're looking for is changes in behavior. So they might get more withdrawn or frustrated and feel like they're not participating in the same way. Looking for those speech and language milestones, and if they're delayed that way, then that's a good indicator that hearing might play a role there. You might have them mispronouncing words or mishearing words, especially when they're really little. Then you're looking for things like having them, not react to loud sounds. So if big brother's beside them and is banging on pots and they're not responding at all, then it's probably not that they're just used to that. It's probably that they're not hearing that sound come through.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Some telltale signs, so to speak, to see how the child's reacting as they're growing. So another question for us adults and parents, of course, maybe at what point should an adult have their hearing checked professionally?
First, I would say if you haven't, then you should do it. Um, Regardless of your age or kind of how you feel like your hearing is, it's always good to have a baseline. So if things do shift, then you've got something to compare it to. So that would be the first thing is go get that baseline test done. And then after that, it's kind of whenever you're feeling like there's a change or you or someone close to you is feeling like something's not working the way it should. If those symptoms we talked about before, if you're asking for repetition or a lot, or just things aren't very clear, then get that hearing checked.
Right. So can you describe for us what happens during a hearing check, or maybe what kind of tests are done?
Yeah. So often, as you come through the hearing test, the tests are fairly similar and kind of the flow might change depending on where you're at, but you're going to go through some of your case history of your background and what you've been noticing there. You'll have your ears looked into to see if things are looking typical there, if there's anything that might be causing the problem, whether it's wax or something else stuck in your ear. They'll do a few measurements on your ear to see how well the sound is getting through the middle ear space, if there's pressure or fluid that's causing some hearing loss there, and how well those inner hearing hair cells are responding to the sound. And then we'll kind of move into the hearing booth there or the sound booth, and you'll do some, the infamous beep test that you hear about a lot, of listening to a beep and responding or pushing a button or raising your hand, and then some speech testing as well to see how well you're able to hear and respond to speech in quiet and in noise.
Mm-hmm. Now, tinnitus is a common problem that can be debilitating because of its persistence. Can you talk a little bit about the causes and if there's any possible solutions or relief?
Yeah. So tinnitus it's a little bit of a gray area depending on kind of what the cause is. Sometimes it can just be something medical where, there might be a medical resolution for it to kind of resolve that. But most of the time it's kind of unknown what the cause is. One of the leading theories there is, in simple terms, it's the brain trying to fill in for missing information. So with hearing loss or things, then we're not having the same sound come in, and the brain's realizing that something's not there. So it's kind of filling in that space with another sound. So often in those situations, things like a hearing aid can play a big role by filling that blank back in and giving you that sound again. There are other therapies you can look into for tinnitus. Often things like sound, white noise, different masking noise at nighttime can kind of help give the brain something else to focus on to help you fall asleep. Things like that. It's all pretty individual. So with that one, then we would certainly want to look at it more in deeper detail on a case-by-case basis with you in the clinic.
Right. So have you seen a connection between the ringing in one's ears and their diet, or as we talked about earlier, the weather patterns here in southern Alberta?
A little bit, there's some research that looks into, high sodium diet and alcohol, things like that can play a role in how much the ears are going to ring. Personally, I haven't seen it too much. It's typically more what I've seen a lot more of is related to noise and hearing loss there.
Gotcha. And just in general, overall ear health, has there been research connecting nutrition and hearing?
There has. There's, I'm not aware of anything recently to speak to particularly, but there has been a little bit typically associated more with, tinnitus or specific causes and what might be involved there.
Right. So what are some of the solutions for hearing loss? Does it mean a hearing aid in all cases, or are there other solutions?
So hearing aid is the most typical solution. It just depends on the kind of hearing loss that it is. So if it's something, if there's fluid in the middle ear, then you might need to go into kind of a medical intervention and have some surgery or something like that. But most of the time, a hearing aid is kind of what we would be looking at there.
Gotcha. Now, we're fortunate to have Alberta Health Services. Is there any tax dollars or money offered through AHS that helps with coverage for children or seniors, low-income households like that?
There is, yeah. So for seniors and low income and children, then there is some funding that's available. And again, with your health number and information, we can look into their system to see what coverage it might be. Sometimes the an entry level pair of hearing aids might be fully covered. Sometimes there just might be some funding that helps towards those costs. But yes, certainly in Alberta, we're lucky to have some sort of support there.
Yeah. Now, just before we wrap this up, tell our viewers how they can get a hold of you.
So I'm at our Hearing Life clinic here in Lethbridge. Well, there's a few of us around, but there's lots of hearing clinics in Lethbridge and around to look into and get a hearing test. Typically, it's only within a few days that you should be able to make an appointment and get in to get things checked. So don't stress about long wait lists or anything like that. Just give us a call and we can get you in. Me particularly, I'm at my clinic half-time. I also work with the school divisions as an educational audiologist, which is kind of an interesting twist there to see how the students are able to learn and have access to the sound there. But yeah.
Well, that sounds really interesting. I think I might have buried the headline, but could you talk about hearing and learning and how that impacts children at school?
Yeah, so often the biggest thing is just access. With the teacher of the deaf that I work with, and we're all often talking about, visual problems are usually a little bit more obvious. When you see that they're not looking in the right direction at all, then there might be something happening there. With hearing, those students are usually kind of in the classroom and they might look like they're paying attention, but they don't have the same access to the sound that's coming through, so they can't process that sound. And so we just need to work with the students for advocating for themselves and work with their teachers and learning teams to make sure that the right equipment is in place and that the right training happens there.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for that. Thanks so much for being with us today, Mitchell.
Well, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, it was great to have you here. That was Mitchell Harris. He is an audiologist with Hearing Life here in Lethbridge, Alberta. I'm Michael Clausen, and for all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.